I became involved in the issue of embodied carbon. My Girl Scout troop, who at the time were 5th and 6th graders, we actually started with a project drawdown list that identified different potential solutions and how big of impact those different types of solutions would have. And we worked almost as a process of elimination. And we were looking for a topic that was something that folks hadn't heard much about yet, and something that was both local and global, and something that just the idea of young voices talking about it could really have a meaningful difference in shaping the dialogue. So it had to be something that was really fairly new and something that people hadn't heard about as much yet. And so we started out making videos and trying to raise awareness then locally as well. The girls did presentations locally and worked to get the word out. And that's how I became involved.
My name is Ben Austin. I'm the sustainability lead at Findorff. We are a commercial general contractor headquartered in Madison, Wisconsin, and have the majority of our footprint in terms of the projects we build within the state. I'm our only dedicated sustainability professional. I've been in the role for about 4 years, but my origin story to sustainability starts long before I started it as my full-time role here. I am the grandson of an environmental writer and public radio host. My dad was a city planner. And so I think those two individuals specifically had a big impact on this idea of environmentalism plus planning in the built environment that somehow manifested themselves into me becoming a civil engineer and pursuing that through my undergraduate studies. So buildings and project management were really what I did for probably 7 years or so. And then again, that passion for sustainability was always there. So I was trying to find in the early years of my career, like how do I, find a way to blend my day-to-day life in construction project management with this passion for sustainability. And I think that's really where I started to build out, there's a huge opportunity in the construction industry to act on sustainability. And I definitely saw that internally with Findorff and where I was at, and have had great support to build out that role internally. So since I've been in a full-time sustainability role, right, it's all things sustainability. It's environmental sustainability, carbon action and reduction, health and wellness related to our buildings, resiliency. So it's a variety of topics. But, going back to what Julia said, operational carbon and kind of the energy use related to our buildings has been a focus for a really long time of the buildings industry. And embodied carbon has been a little bit neglected or not at the forefront. So, I think as these conversations have started, that was one topic as a contractor that just really came to the forefront as, a big opportunity in terms of what the industry, what we as a construction company, and what I personally could do to maybe have an opportunity to have a bigger impact related to my day-to-day work.
That impact that you're describing is really what was a tremendous motivation for our girls early on in the project in identifying this topic. We realized that if one building had reduced embodied carbon by just 20%, a larger building 10%, 20%, that the volume of carbon reduction, the amount of CO2 that could be reduced in the process of that project was somewhere between 50 or 100 cars off the road.
Yeah, and I can absolutely echo that. I think, you find the solution that requires just like a slight pivot in how you deliver a project and show that it works on one project and find ways to make it repeatable. The opportunity related impact is huge. So minor modifications to a concrete mix, different communication strategies with steel suppliers to understand, where you can source lower embodied carbon steel from. They can be relatively minor changes that can have a big impact on the overall carbon footprint of a project. So I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Well, and there's so many different stakeholders in the building process that can have a say in changing little tweaks that can make a big difference. So across that entire design build process, the material selection process, there are so many different angles to look at the embodied carbon issue that reaching a broad audience had real relevance.
Yeah, and maybe that goes to the point, Julia, thinking about, a lot of embodied carbon conversation and action had maybe been led by areas like the Pacific Northwest, thinking of Seattle, and maybe some of the coastal areas. But I know you're the one who brought that conversation to that broad group of stakeholders in Wisconsin. So I don't know if you want to highlight the conversation that kind of got me involved in the whole effort early last year.
Sure. Well, in the process of doing this project and starting to present to different groups, one of our girls actually commented, hey, it'd be really great if everyone could just talk to each other. This all sounds really complicated. Lots of people doing lots of different things. Everyone just needs to talk to each other was the idea that was in our Girl Scout meeting as hey, this is a really important step forward. And as a way of addressing that, we put together a roundtable, a virtual roundtable, and invited folks from around the state to participate. And we're really excited to get really broad participation from about, I think we had about 60 or 70 folks on that original call. And from that was the Carbon Leadership Forum hub, kind of came from that original meeting.
The conversation that Julia and her troop facilitated with the Carbon Leadership Forum was really to see kind of, from my perspective, who was interested in the conversation and talking about the subject. And that's what brought me to the table. And, it ended with, it's powerful when you hear from a group of Girl Scouts who are doing amazing things and getting, a lot of recognition around the country and even beyond. So to me, it was a call to action. The future generation of engineers and construction managers were telling us, this is important and we care about this, and so someone who's sitting, working, for a large general contractor focused on sustainability, it was really a call to action to say, what can you do in your day to day? So I took that to heart. And, Julie and I, we kept in touch after that, trying to figure this out. And I think that was really the early foundations of what became our Carbon Leadership Forum and Wisconsin Hub. Julie and I are representing the Carbon Leadership Forum Hub for Wisconsin. Kim Radine, who is the Sustainability Director at Flat Architects, is our third kind of original co-lead, and then Chelsea Duckworth with Whole Trees added to our team. So we're the four co-leads in the Wisconsin Hub. And again, we just encourage anybody, if you're within the state of Wisconsin, to reach out to one of us and engage with what we're doing. You can engage with us if you're outside the state as well, but there is also likely an opportunity to reach out to someone to your local area and find ways, or maybe even start your own hub if there isn't one that exists. Yeah, and then just a little bit on the history of the Carbon Leadership Forum itself. It's a nonprofit actually that originated out of the University of Washington's College of Built Environments, and that was in 2010, so a little over a decade ago. And as Julia mentioned, right, within the College of Built Environments at a research institution, right, it's kind of got research at its core, but then action through these different toolkits and resources to allow, practitioners, thinking architects, engineers, contractors, but a lot more too, to try to accelerate that action more quickly. And we talked about the hubs, and I think there's dozens at this point across the world. There's a Latin America hub, for example, but the first hub only started in 2019, and that was in Seattle. And that was a group of practitioners, again, who were very familiar with the Carbon Leadership Forum's work and all those resources that they had been providing to the industry. And I think that was really people looking to say, how do we act on these resources and have conversations, right? Utilize those toolkits, get together with other professionals and kind of talk through how do we implement these in our day-to-day work. It's a really interesting, grassroots concept that I think has been a great way for anybody to access the content in whatever way they're looking to engage.
The Carbon Leadership Forum Hub really is for anybody who is involved in the process of designing and building structures and making decisions about structures. So that could be anybody from policymakers who are considering the implications of their decisions for the built environment. It could be local agency staff who are managing infrastructure projects. It could be architects, structural engineers. It could be the folks who are working on the data side and providing environmental data about materials or about the design build process. So really, it's across the whole spectrum of anyone involved in making building related decisions can benefit from understanding what is embodied carbon, what are the ways that it can be addressed, what are the types of tools and resources available, and what are some of the challenges of connecting with other professionals who are also trying to do this work, but in different contexts. We noticed as a Girl Scout troop, really there's not a lot of resources for young people yet, largely because this is still such a new issue professionally as well. So while there are there's a lot of information available for young people to understand energy conservation, for example, the idea of the built environment and the specifically building materials or embodied carbon, there isn't really anything specifically for youth just yet. And so when we started hearing back about our project, that there was really an opportunity for more young people to get involved. The scale of impact that our troop was hoping to have in the project is something that can really only be brought to fruition by getting young people involved all over the country. So our troop can make, so much of a difference in Wisconsin and reach out to as many groups as possible, but it's still only one group of girls, right? And so trying to bring that message and bring that opportunity to young people who are passionate about climate, who are passionate about making a difference, and who are looking for something that's going to be high impact. But they can't do that if they don't know first that it's an issue in the first place, or if they don't understand the types of opportunities that are available for change. And so the goal of the Carbon Zero Youth Initiative is really to bring the overarching concepts, that connection between the built environment, sustainability, but particularly from this embodied carbon side, since that's such an emerging topic, and really get that information out to young people so they can appreciate the impact of the decisions being made at the architecture level, at the structural engineering level, and at the materials level. There's so many pieces, and I think young people would be really, really inspired to know that in their own community, professionals are making decisions every day that have that degree of impact, because it's so enormous. And knowing that bringing a message as simple as, hey, we want you to think about this. There's not many topics, I don't think, for young people to be able to bring to the table that are so impactful and yet an introductory level of information, such as, please think about this issue of embodied carbon. This is what the concept is. Here are some of the different ways people are addressing it. You can help make a difference, is a really powerful message coming from young people. And young people want to be part of the solution. They want to make a change now. They don't just want to think about it in the future. They are interested in careers for it going forward and are excited to hear that there are careers where they could make such a big difference. But they want to get involved now, and they understand the urgency of the climate change issue. And so the Carbon Zero Youth Initiative is the idea that has come out of this project and the realization that there is this opportunity and this need.
Julie, you mentioned, resources and wanting to see action today, right? The youth want action today. They want practitioners to do it. I think for me, the Carbon Leadership Forum hub in Wisconsin and farther afield, it's like the Carbon Leadership Forum has developed the resources that lay out a blueprint for what can be done. We just need a higher level of awareness, of understanding kind of what the topics are, and then we can start to more easily drive that action. Because again, I think a lot of the resources and the concepts and the workflows exist. We just need to implement them more. So I mean, that's what the youth want to see from practitioners. On the flip side, when you talk about, young people engaging with climate, embodied carbon, whatever the topic is, right? Those are the future policymakers, the future contractors, the future architects, the future business owners. They're going to be bringing this passion into the workforce whenever they enter it. And I think it's a powerful signal to pay attention to for again, maybe the older generations who are in business today to look towards youth and the younger generations to really see what's important in driving them and what will be driving them when they look for jobs, right? So I think a very important point, and the Carbon Zero Youth Initiative is a really awesome initiative that I'm looking forward to continue to stay on top of in my work with Julia.
Well, there's so many opportunities that are very tangible for young people to be able to speak in their communities. Our Girl Scout troop found things like presenting at local local chapter meetings for concrete industry groups, for example, was a way to help get the message out. Presenting at the local Board of Public Works meetings, presenting at the local architecture conference or the state architecture events. Were very tangible opportunities to get the message out there. And young people really haven't gotten to be a part of those conversations. And yet I think there's a tremendous demand from people within the building industry to see young faces and hear young voices, because those are the future of that industry, right? So having young people involved and part of those kind of events, using their voices to express their interest and concern for sustainability, and really driving motivation and interest in addressing sustainability topics. There's a lot of opportunity to see that, and a lot of really tangible ways that people can react to that message. And so I think there's just such tremendous opportunity for young people to feel like they are part of the movement, and really to make a big difference in generating awareness and enthusiasm. And so that's really where this all came from, is how do we get young people in front of the audiences that want to hear them and want to hear their message, and yet are looking to have that increase in motivation, increase in momentum and enthusiasm that really drives these sort of practical steps that people across the process can take.
Yeah, so I mean, since I've been involved in the Carbon Leadership Forum Hub, right, a portion of my time, is going into really thinking more directly into embodied carbon specifically, and how as a contractor can we look to, take things we're already doing. I think I fully acknowledge that the building industry specifically, things move very fast. There's construction budgets and tight construction schedules that drive a lot of the capacity conversation, right? And so for me, it's, I think, finding ways to make those minor pivots in the process that, building projects kind of go through. And so, again, as I've been involved in the Carbon Leadership Forum Hub of Wisconsin, I think I try to think about specifically the data that we have at our fingertips, kind of how can we extract data. So I'll use an example of, right, most of our building projects utilize building information modeling, right, which builds a 3D model of your building before anything's built. It allows us to efficiently, check for clashes with ductwork and do a variety of other things. But it also gives us the opportunity to have, an embodied carbon analysis built into all those projects. That's not something we've streamlined and operationalized on all projects. But again, if we figure out how to do that for one project, there's an easy way to scale it up when you're using those existing resources, and it becomes another, another benchmark or another point that as we move through, design development for a building, we can say, okay, what's the cost, but also what's the carbon cost of this project? And so I think internally, my mind is going to how to make minor tweaks to better operationalize that analysis and that data gathering so that we can make informed decisions on a cost basis, on a carbon basis, again, that thinks about that the long-term issue of climate change, right? It brings it more front of mind if you have data to make decisions on throughout the process. A shameless plug for the Carbon Leadership Forum Hub of Wisconsin, or truthfully, if you're anywhere across the United States, there's probably a hub somewhere in your region. So, I mean, these groups, specifically the Carbon Leadership Forum hubs related to embodied carbon, they're meant to bring people to the table to have a conversation. So first and foremost, engage with the content. We understand that people are coming at the topic from a variety of different perspectives. But I think engaging is absolutely step one, and just talk about what you're doing and knowledge share. And then to a point that we've made a few times, I think largely the resources in a lot of the studies for how to do these things in an ideal setting is already available in the industry. There's ways that, step 1, 2, 3, this is what you need to do. I think what we need to do is take that and do more, right? We need to inspire that action. So once you're engaged with the topic, I think you just at some point need to jump in. And a good example is maybe, LCA, life cycle assessment software, which allows you to quantify the embodied carbon for a building. We just had a session for the Carbon Leadership Forum Hub a week or two ago that was about the variety of tools that are available in the industry to get involved with today. And there's tutorials, there's educational resources and walkthroughs. So our goal with that discussion was just to say, hey, here are the tools that are being used to quantify embodied carbon in the market. Here are some resources to get you started. Oh, and hey, there's a 10-day free trial, or this is a free tool. So, I think just you don't need to know everything to get involved. You can try it, and you learn by doing and learn by sharing with your peers. So I think more and more as I think about my day-to-day and what I can do, it's not like I need to know everything about embodied carbon before I get started. Just jump in, pick a project and try to develop a process that makes sense. There's benefit for the project owner, there's benefit for you, there's benefit for the environment, and try to figure out where those win-win situations are and utilize the tools and the research that's available at hand. And I think the Carbon Leadership Forum has been a perfect repository for those types of tools and things that I'm definitely leaning on as I continue to learn through my professional work and through my involvement with the Carbon Leadership Forum Hub.
One thing that I've heard throughout this project and through Carbon Leadership Forum is that small changes and small discussions can have a very big impact further down the line. A single structural engineer puts a note or adds in the specification that they'll allow for a low carbon material, and that gets a materials producer, talking amongst their community and saying, how do we rise to meet this demand? And those small changes throughout the process are really valuable. And I would just encourage people to take whatever steps that they feel that fit for them and to really just keep talking about the issue, because having change across this entire building process involves everybody having some general understanding of the overarching goal of addressing embodied carbon. And at this point, there's still a lot of just learning that this is an issue to start with in the first place. So even if you're not super familiar with embodied carbon, it doesn't mean you can't make a difference. You can make a difference by asking your coworker about what they've heard about embodied carbon. That conversation taking place is already an important starting point, right? So no matter where you're at in the process of learning about embodied carbon, you can help be a part of the process of making change on it, because every single person that is talking about it and asking for it and starting to use the tools, starting to dialogue, does move the whole picture forward. And that's why I wouldn't want anyone to feel discouraged if they're like, I haven't started this yet, or I've never heard of this. They can still have a really big impact. And that's part of where getting young voices involved and helping drive that enthusiasm and drive the demand and the interest plays such a big role, is getting those initial conversations going, because this is still really a fairly new issue for many, many people, and really just an important overall approach with lots of pieces to be considered. So really, there's so many steps that can make a difference, that starting with one is a good place. I think really the transition from identifying buildings as a place where we need to reduce embodied carbon to thinking, as you said, Ben, holistically in this whole picture, how can buildings really be a part of the overall solution, and having everybody who's involved with buildings, which really means basically everybody, because everybody lives and works and goes to school in buildings, and having people understand that the buildings that they're in play a really important role in climate, and that they can be considered really great opportunities for addressing climate, both in the process of building them and in the process of managing their energy use. And so the combination of those opportunities is something that I think every citizen, no matter whether you're involved professionally with buildings or not, is an important transition for people to have general awareness that those decisions really matter to the climate.
Yeah, absolutely. If I didn't think buildings were part of the solution, I wouldn't be in this industry, truthfully. And I think we spend 90% of our time indoors, home, work, our third spaces, whatever they might be. I'm a huge proponent of, figure out the process and do these things on buildings, but then after the building's done, take those learnings, take the data around the building and use the physical space as a teaching tool. So again, schools is a perfect example of empowering younger generations. We built the first net zero energy school in the state of Wisconsin, just south of Madison in Oregon. And that building is just absolutely covered in graphics related to geothermal energy, wind energy, and a variety of other topics. And, they're communicating to kindergarten through sixth graders in that space, all these topics around sustainability. And going back to Julia's point, right, those are the types of things and impacts that, as we think about in school settings, younger generations, but in office settings, right, it could be done to other generations as well, in offices and public buildings and hospitals, et cetera. I think utilizing our buildings as a teaching tool when we do the solutions right is a big opportunity to show it off and make an impact, because we do spend so much of our time indoors, right, in our buildings. Whether we like it or not, they're a part of our world. So how we do it matters.